Hey, let me introduce you to everybody who's watching on YouTube here. Jonjo, he's an experienced SEO, digital marketing strategist. He brings a wealth of knowledge from years of helping brands improve their online visibility and performance. Known for his insightful, practical approach, he combines technical experience and expertise with a relatable communication style, making complex SEO concepts accessible and actionable. And I certainly appreciate that, especially where we're going in the deeper wells of AI ranking and performance. So we need some of those analogies and metaphors, Jonjo.
That's it.
I'm going to hand it over to you. This is your presentation. Go for it.
Amazing. Can you see that now?
Gotcha.
Amazing. Cool. So I'm going to be talking. Yeah, cool. Brilliant. Nice. So my name is Jonjo. So I'm really happy to be here. I'm happy to be invited along today to talk about branding and visibility, which I'm sure you're aware is a very hot topic in the SEO world at the moment. So a tiny little bit about me. My name is Jonjo. I'm founder of Jelly, which is a digital marketing agency based in Portsmouth on the south coast of the UK, which is very cold and rainy and horrible at the moment. But I've been in digital for over 15 years now, so you can believe me when I say that I have definitely seen my fair share of changes in the industry, and this is another big one that we're going through at the moment. And I often get asked to speak at industry events, particularly around SEO and behavioural science. So if this was an in-person event, I would ask for a show of hands. But a huge number of people on LinkedIn and on YouTube and other platforms all trying to sell you this dream, I think, of automating your entire business with AI as if it's some kind of miracle platform, which is obviously nonsense. And I love AI. I do think it's a brilliant tool when used in the right way. But I feel the need to differentiate myself, I think, against the kind of bros who are trying to shill some kind of AI automation tool against what I want to do today. So I'd like to start by letting you know that I certainly don't have a giga prompt for ChatGPT, whatever that means. I don't promise some spammy ways to publish 2,000 articles in one click, or indeed any of the other too good to be true, clickbaity types of videos and articles on LinkedIn that you might have seen over the years. And this is just a tiny proportion of the ones that are out there. My advice generally is to ignore all of these kinds of SEO and GEO now bros, or anyone who says SEO is dead, or anyone who's trying a little bit too hard to make GEO a thing. So let's get into it. Now, I want to start in a slightly unusual way today. I want to go back to the absolute basics, because I think that is the only way that we can properly understand what's changing now that we're living in the age of AI search. So we're going to go right back to the beginning and talk about how SEO works in super simple terms. So every traditional search always starts with a user wanting to find some kind of information, whether that's a question or they want to find a product, they're just looking for something. When they go to Google, they type in a keyword, and Google then searches its vast database for what it considers the most relevant sites for that particular keyword. And it displays them in a SERP, which stands for Search Engine Results Page. And the user then chooses a result from the list and lands on a web page. Now, this is how it works with everything keywords. So the keywords are, of course, the words or phrases that people type into Google in order to find what they're looking for. And there are a vast range of different types of keywords. Sometimes it's just one word, sometimes a whole phrase, sometimes a question. Keywords come in all shapes and sizes. In the early days of SEO, as I like to call them, the glory days, you could just put a keyword on the page 50 times and call it a day. That's when I used to have an easy job. You can't do that anymore. Google's obviously a lot more sophisticated now. And that means that SEOs quickly learned that individual keywords don't tell the whole story. What really matters, actually, is the intent behind them. So we have this concept in SEO of keyword intent. Basically, you need to understand what people are actually trying to achieve with their search. There are four main types of keyword intent. They are navigational, commercial, transactional, and informational. And we need to understand what each of these mean. So navigational is looking for a specific resource or a specific website or page, because nobody goes to a browser and types www.facebook.com. You just go to Google, type Facebook, and you click the top link. So keywords like that we refer to as navigation. And it could be, for example, it could be your brand name. They're just looking for your website and that's it. Then commercial keywords are researched before making a purchase. And obviously that could be a product or a service. Basically anyone who is looking to buy something down the line and they're researching and comparing before they make a decision. So an example would be best SEO agencies. They're obviously looking to compare the different options that they've got. Then transactional keywords are when people are ready to make a purchase or take an action now. So keywords like buy coffee online, I put here as a good example of that. They're not looking to compare anymore necessarily, they're actually ready to part with some cash now. And then finally, we have informational keywords, and these are your who, what, where, why, how, question type keywords. An example would be, what is a canonical tag? They aren't looking to necessarily engage an SEO agency, they're just looking to learn about the topic or answer a question. And they're the four main types of keyword intent. And individual keywords they can be in multiple categories, the lines blur, but broadly, those are the four types of intent. So until recently, every type of keyword intent was dominated by one player, and that obviously was Google. They had this kind of monopoly. But what we're seeing now is a diversification in the types of search engines that people are using. And obviously, there's always been players like Bing and DuckDuckGo, things like that. They're still traditional search engines. So for simplicity, I just call them Google. That's basically the same thing. But what we have now is not just people potentially choosing an alternative search engine, but people going to different types of platform entirely for certain types of keywords. And if you listen to the LinkedIn hustlers, you might be inclined to believe that the modern search landscape looks a little bit like this. In reality, that's not true. It's not as simple as people are searching on ChatGPT now. It's way more complicated than that, unfortunately. So firstly, Google still absolutely eclipses ChatGPT in terms of overall search volume. But also the reality is that search engine choice depends on keyword intent. And that's the whole reason why I wanted to look at the keywords and the keyword intent, is because it's not as simple as people are trying to make out. It looks, in reality, a lot more like this. Certain types of keyword are still very much dominated by Google, and I think they will be for the foreseeable future. Navigational keywords, I put here as a primary example of that, because nobody is going to ChatGPT and type in Facebook login as a quick way of navigating to Facebook. It's just not happening. It probably never will. And equally, there aren't very many people going to ChatGPT and just typing buy coffee online, although obviously OpenAI are very much working on that. They would like that to be the case. But you might go to Google, you also might very well go to Amazon for that kind of search intent. But what we do see is for commercial and informational keywords, different types of search engine are becoming a lot more important. If people want to learn about a topic, people seem to be growing more and more comfortable with using. So I was about to say is that this Christmas I'm supposed to be cooking roast goose for 9 people. I've never cooked goose before. I've only ever done turkey. And years ago, I might have Googled that and read an article. Now I go to TikTok and watch a 30-second video because it matches my intent far better. So the point that I want to make by saying that is that this isn't actually particularly new. SEOs like me have been dealing with this type of thing for years and years now. So one way to determine the value of a keyword is by looking at search volume. That's roughly how many people search for it per month. And as an example, 15,000 people a month, roughly, search for the keyword, how old is Taylor Swift? And once upon a time, that would have been an extremely valuable keyword to rank #1 for, right? Because people would click on your link, visit your site and find the answer, and you could monetize that through ads. Nowadays, that keyword, despite being searched for probably just as often, is practically worthless because when you click it, when you search for it, you get the answer directly in the results page. So you never click on a website. And of course, that's called a zero-click search. It's been happening for years now. And so us SEOs, we know a thing or two about operating in a post-click era. And broadly, it just means we need to focus on different strategies, which I will go on to explain. So that's a high-level overview of what's happening, I think, in search at the moment. And the next thing we need to talk about is why brand. Why am I saying that the most important thing for SEO in 2026 will be your brand? Well, the main reason is that search engines love brands, right? And because, and I think for good reason, if you think about it. So Google's goal, like any company, is to make as much money as possible. And in order to do that, they need to keep people coming back to the platform. And in order to do that, they need to give people what they want. And what people generally want is results that they can trust. We've found that users are far more likely to click on and be satisfied by a website that they recognize than an unknown entity, because culturally, brands, they are sort of a shorthand for credibility and quality. So Over time, when all the data comes in, Google has aligned its algorithms to favor established authorities. It's about as simple as that. Now, it's worth saying that this doesn't mean that you have to be Coca-Cola or Nike in order to rank in Google, because brands come in all different sizes, but branding is really important. And the way Google measures this is through a metric called Site Quality Score. It was about a year ago now, I think, a Google exploit was discovered by Mark Williams Cook, and it gave us incredible insight into this. If you haven't already, I urge everybody to watch this video all the way through, because it is absolutely excellent and it goes into this into some detail. But the part that we're particularly interested in today is how Google decides on a quality score for your site. And Mark found that there were three main factors. Those are anchor text relevance across the web and how often your brand name appears in anchor text on other sites. The next is user interactions, and that's particularly so how often people choose your result in search, even when you don't rank in position number 1. And then how often people search for your brand by name. So essentially, I think of this as a measure of how famous your brand is within your niche. So hopefully I've convinced you now that brand is incredibly important for SEO. So now we're going to look at what you actually need to do in order to get ahead in 2026. And the good news is that if you've been doing solid SEO, I think you're 95% of the way there, because nobody should be tearing up their existing SEO strategies. The main reason for that is because most of what people are calling GEO and AEO, etc., is what we've been doing for years in SEO anyway. But there are some specific best practices that you can implement now that will dramatically, I think, increase your chances of being cited in answer engines as well as in traditional search. And at Jelly, we call these the 4 T's. They are technical optimization, trust signals, topical authority, and talkability. And I'll explain what each of those means now. We'll start with technical optimization. So the main thing to remember, I think, is that both humans and bots are visiting your website. So Google and ChatGPT, they all have bots that crawl your site. But the humans and the bots, they're not seeing the same thing. Humans see what's on the left, and the bots are much more comfortable with what's on the right. That means we need to present that information to the bots in a way that they can best understand and read it. First thing we obviously need is fast, accessible code. And one way you can test this is by using SE Ranking's website speed test tool. So you just need to go to the link here, type in your website address, and it will test your page and give you a score out of 100. 90 plus considered good. Most sites, I think, probably in the 60s or 70s. And if it's anything under that, that's a sign you have some kind of issues that you should probably address with your developers. That's a really good tool. And then the next thing I want to talk about in terms of technical optimization is schema. And for those who might not know, the best way I can describe schema is that it's, I call it like Google language. It's code that helps search engines understand context. So as a human, you're pretty good at understanding context. If you see a number on a web page, you can usually tell whether it's, for example, like a price or a phone number just from visual cues and experience. And to be fair, robots are pretty good at this, but they can make mistakes. So what we do is we use schema to explicitly tell the robots exactly what everything is. And it sits in the back end of the site, so no human ever sees it, but it helps the robots understand you a little bit better. Now, schema has traditional SEO benefits, and the main one is that it makes your site eligible for rich results and rich snippets in search. So a normal result might look like this. It's just a link, meta description, and that's it, really boring. But a rich result, on the other hand, can have images, it can have star ratings, it can have pricing data, a whole range of other things that make it far more likely that your site will then be clicked. But there are also now, I think, branding benefits to schema as well. And the reason for that is because it helps to establish your business as a unique entity. So it might, for example, prevent Google from confusing you with other companies maybe that share a similar name, things like that. And there's a really cool tool that you can use to understand what entity information Google holds about your brand. So you just go to the link on the left or use the QR code and you put in a keyword. So you might put your name, you might put your company name, and you'll get a nice list of all the entities that Google knows about that are related to that keyword. So it can be really useful to put your brand name in there, see what Google understands about it, and make sure that it actually agrees with related. So we know schema is super important, and to test whether you have schema on your site in the first place, or if it's good enough, you can use my handy schema extractor tool using this link. So you just paste that into your web address into the tool, and what it will do is it'll scan the site, extract the schema, and you can then analyze it and see what you've got on there. And it's also a really good way of looking at your competitors' schema to see if there's anything that they're doing that you might then want to emulate. If you don't have any schema, or if there's more schema types that you think you should add, reach out to your web developer and get that sorted, because it's a really, really good win. Now, you may or may not have seen on LinkedIn, etc., talk about implementing a specific file for LLMs called llms.txt. My advice broadly at the moment is that it's not worth worrying about, because all the major AI platforms have said that they don't use it. And I implemented one on my website, and I can see from the server logs that it hasn't been accessed a single time. It's just simply not being used. So it's not going to hurt, but it's also not worth the effort right now, just not worth bothering with. So that's technical optimization. It's always been important, but I think today it's more important than ever in the kind of new world of SEO. Next up, I want to talk about trust signals. So trust signals include things like reviews and accreditations and awards, or anything that confirms to the humans and also to the bots that you're a real and reputable business. And the more consistent and verifiable these signals are, the more confidently both users and, of course, the machines will trust your firm. For a long time now, it's not been enough to say, we offer this service, or we sell this product, or write a blog that says, this is what this thing means. You have to actually show your receipts. You have to prove it. You have to prove that you are an authority on a topic. And it's even more important if you operate within YMYL, which stands for your money or your life. So that's basically any site that deals with topics like healthcare or finance. They're held to a much higher standard in Google. And as they should be, because if Google gets it wrong, there could be real world consequences. But it's important for all sites. And by the way, one thing that never gets mentioned when we talk about trust signals is you do actually have to have good content in the first place. You have to actually be an authority on a topic. So the tips I'm going to show you are totally useless if you don't have that as the bare minimum. So I'm going to assume your content is great. I'm going to look at how we can get Google to notice that properly. Firstly, we have third-party reviews, and it doesn't have to be Trustpilot. Any third-party review platform will do. But the key is that it does have to be, I think, a third-party platform. Testimonials that you publish on your website that you directly control are pretty much worthless in the eyes of bots, because you could obviously write anything, give yourself 5 stars and just make that the reviews. You should be sending your customers review requests as standard in order to build up your reviews. And I always recommend, where possible, I know it's hard in the first place just to do this at all, but it's where possible to spread them around and to different platforms. So not all your reviews live in one place. Because if you lose your Google business profile, for example, which does happen, I've seen it all the time, and your reviews are all on there, overnight they could be gone. So build reviews in multiple places if you can. And next, you really should be implementing an up-to-date Meet the Team page. At bare minimum, it should have a decent photo of everyone, preferably all in the same style, a little bit about their expertise, and something a lot of people forget is a link to their LinkedIn profile, because that acts as social proof. It's a much stronger signal than just writing this person is an expert, because it proves that it's a real person with real expertise. And then finally, we have author blocks. Every single blog post that you publish on your site should have an author attributed to it. And it's often overlooked, and it becomes even more important now because ChatGPT is a thing, and creating content in general is easier than ever. So when bots are crawling that content, they need to quickly work out what's actually worth listening to and what is a load of old rubbish. And having a specific expert attached to an article is one of the best ways to signal that this is quality, well-researched content, with the caveat being that it does actually have to be quality, well-researched content. You can't just slap an author block onto some AI slop and expect anything to happen. Now, that only really scratches the surface of all the possible trust signals that you should be considering. So what I've done is I've put together a free trust signal checklist that you can use to audit your site, and it's got hundreds of possible trust signals for you to look into. So you just go through the list, give your site a pass or a fail for each one, and you'll end up with a long list of actions and ideas that you can use to improve your site. So that's trust signals. It's a really important factor in modern search. Next up, we're going to talk about topical authority. So topical authority is, I like to call it the depth and consistency of your expertise on a specific subject. It's built by covering a topic comprehensively rather than just sort of on a surface level. So answering every single question that somebody might have on a topic. That means rather than having just a single landing page on a topic and calling it a day, you need to build a complete cluster of related content on the topic in order to show rounded expertise. Search engines and now AI models recognize these patterns, and eventually they learn to associate your site with that topic, which in turn makes you a viable source whenever it's mentioned or queried. So the first thing you need to know in order to cover a topic fully is what are people actually asking. So let's say that you are a Christmas tree retailer. You've built your website, you've got a solid landing page selling your Christmas trees. Now you need to round out your authority on the topic of Christmas trees. And to do that, we need to do some keyword research. So your first port of call is obviously going to be SEO ranking. Now, I don't have enough time today to go through a full keyword research strategy, but broadly speaking, our goal is to map out a cluster of related subtopics and to use that to create new content on our site. We're looking at all the different types of similar keywords, related keywords, and all the questions that real people are actually asking and want to know. So if we're that Christmas tree firm, we have our rock solid landing page for Christmas trees at the top. And from there, we look at all the questions that people have related to Christmas trees, and we might then be able to group those into 3 broad pillars. So here I've put the species of Christmas trees, caring for your tree, and maybe then queries around sustainability and that side of things. And then we can start to create the content within those clusters, and through internal linking, we start to build and grow our authority for the overall subject of Christmas trees. Quite often I talk about these things with clients as a necessary evil. We don't really want to start publishing pages and pages about the difference between Norman fir and Norway spruce and things like that, but it's a necessary evil. We have to do that in order to prove that we're experts on what we actually really want to rank for, which is selling Christmas trees. So that's topical authority, and it's really, really important now for owning a topic and for getting cited in things like AI overviews. And finally, we have talkability. Now, this isn't, I don't think, really the best name for it, but it's the best I could think of because it had to start with a T. But essentially, this is being part of the conversation or being talked about outside of your website. And it's really the final piece of the puzzle, and probably the hardest part of the puzzle. So up until now, we've been talking about things that we can achieve on our own sites. So pretty much we can do what we want. But now we're talking about things that happen on other platforms and other websites that we might not have direct control over. So it becomes much more difficult. And they are some of the strongest signals to search engines that you're an authority. And the reason is, well, of course, we're going to say that we're experts on a topic, but if you can get third parties to back you up, it's a much, much stronger message to search engines and to humans. I'm sure everyone's aware of the importance of things like backlinks of other websites linking to you. Google sees that as essentially a vote for your website, and it's for much the same reason. It's a third party backing you up. So firstly, I want to talk about citations. So a citation in this context, it's a structured listing of your business details online, and it helps to confirm to the crawlers who you are, where you're based, and essentially that you are real and trading. And generally speaking, the more you have, the better. Examples are your Google business profile, directory listings, but also don't forget your social media profiles. They also count for this, and to make sure you have them set up, make sure you post them regularly. There are some best practices for citations. The most important one is this: keep your NAP data identical everywhere. So NAP stands for name, address, phone number. It's really important to keep it consistent across every touch point. So for example, if your name is ABC Solicitors and all your directory listings have different versions of that, it's sometimes difficult. Remember when we were talking about entities earlier, it's difficult for search engines to actually consistently link them back to you. And so much of the benefit of them could be lost if it doesn't necessarily see those as the same thing. So make sure you search your brand name regularly and make sure that any mention of you is consistent, and you choose one and stick with it. So the next thing we need to do is make sure that you list on as many credible platforms as possible, with credible being the important part there. So generally, the more listings you have, the better, because in the eyes of Google, the more visible you are on a number of different touch points, the more real and established you look. But there's no value in being on platforms that themselves have no credibility. So start with the main ones, start with the Google business profile, Bing places, directories like Yell in the UK. And don't forget industry-specific ones as well. There's lots and lots of really, really good ones in every single little niche. And then finally, we need to be as active as possible with posting, so on socials, but also on your Google business profile. which I know it's easier said than done, especially if you're a smaller brand, because there just aren't enough hours in the day. But it is really important because businesses that are active will always be prioritized, and regular posting is one of the best ways, I think, to signal that. And then finally, there are mentions. So mentions it's something you can't directly control, because basically it's other people talking about you online. And unless you're Apple or Coca-Cola, it's really difficult to consistently achieve. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some of the best practices, because if you can do it, it will put you miles ahead of your competitors, especially if you're a local brand. And it's definitely the hardest part, but we're going to try. So the first thing to do is encourage conversations about you. So the easiest and most obvious one is to encourage reviews. So everyone should be doing that as standard, but also encouraging conversations on socials and on forums like Reddit. It's not easy because it takes time and it can definitely backfire, but especially Reddit is one of the most cited sources for AI information. So being active on there can be a huge win. And I do appreciate that it's easier for some brands than others, but it is possible for loads, a much wider range than people realize. For example, I find for hospitality brands, it's pretty easy, I think, to generate conversations. You just go to your local town subreddit, post about dinner recommendations, then with another profile, we recommend your restaurant or hotel, easy peasy. But obviously it's a little bit sneaky, and it does happen all the time, but it's a little bit sneaky. And it's also very possible that it could backfire, because Redditors, they will not hold back if they sniff out marketers. So often a better way, I find, is to just be upfront and to create a branded profile and just join the conversation naturally without being overly salesy, without spamming every single thread. Just adding genuine value to the conversation. If you do that, you probably won't go far wrong. And then we have local and industry coverage. Basically, this is just digital PR. So the goal is to be mentioned as much as possible by credible sources. And again, not every business is going to be able to regularly send press releases and just get loads of local coverage, but it's really powerful if you can do it. And I genuinely believe that there are ways of doing this for any business, even like the really boring ones. So, for example, I once helped this really dry IT management company get local coverage by running a digital skills session for a local school. And then they sent a press release, and they got good coverage, and they got the all-important backlink. It was really, really low effort. And finally, a nice, easy one. You should be making the most of any content that you do produce. So, for example, if you do publish a blog post, you should also be posting it on your Google Business profile, on LinkedIn, and as many other places as possible online, and even encourage your employees to do the same if you can. So make the most of the work you do, and it'll get you far more value out of it. So those are the 4 T's of search visibility in this new AI era, and it's really just a reframing, I think, of traditional SEO. Nothing I've spoken about today is really that new. And that's because what's working hasn't really changed all that much. It's just the framework and the environment that we're working in has changed. But I hope that's given you lots of things to think about. And I guess, any questions?
All right. Hey, thank you, Jonjo. That was a great roll through of trust and credibility and citation needs that all brands need. Hey, real quick question before I go over to QAs. Engines like Perplexity and ChatGPT, Atlas, foreground citations, which asset types would most reliably earn those citations? Original data, expert commentary, comparisons, or FAQ hubs? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's still very similar to the playbook that we had before. We just want to be creating as much content as possible. It's slightly changed. You can't run a business now like you used to be able to. That's sort of purely blogging focused and sort of right. And using that type of model that you used to be able to do. It's not the same as that anymore. It needs to make sense in the context of the wider business, and it needs to make sense within the pillars that you've got. Your services are the most important thing, and the pillars need to lead out. But I still think there's room for be creating as much content as possible.
Absolutely. Got a question from the audience here. Jonjo, which brand signals should teams prioritize in 2026 to ensure their credibility carries into AI-generated answers while still preserving the brand's unique human tone?
I think that's one of the key things, actually, the human tone, because I see anybody who works in digital marketing and looks at a lot of websites will start to recognize the ChatGPT voice, and it's got a certain type of words and phrases, and it's a semantic style that you just notice
time and time again when you start clicking through. So having that kind of human connection, I think one of the things is I almost think of this as part of my manifesto for 2026. SEOs need to understand and realize that branding is part of their job. And they need to understand and read the brand guidelines and realize that they are every single piece of content. It's not branding content and SEO content anymore. It doesn't work like that. Everything is all one thing. And so every single piece of content that you produce has to be on brand and has to have that kind of voice, because people are becoming wiser. It's not just us in a sort of digital space that are seeing it all the time. I see it all the time in comments and on anything. This looks like it was written by ChatGPT. People are becoming wise to it. And so, yeah, that is a really, really important part of the question there, the unique human tone. Make sure that you are speaking as the brand and always sound like you're from the brand.
And that presupposes that they have a brand guideline. If they don't, clients or agency, what have you, they got to develop that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's one of the really, really important tools that everybody should really understand. I always think of brands as people, and if it's almost like you're role playing as a character. Would my character say this? No, they wouldn't. They would say it in this way. They would say it in this way. It's I think that's just a nice sort of framework and a mindset to be in when you're thinking about brands.
Absolutely. Last question, and thank you, Jacob Miller, for that question from Shana Guillar. What do you make of the fact that AIOs seem to have split YMYL? Healthcare has some of the most AIOs, while finance has some of the fewest.
Yeah, I think this is one of the most dangerous things about AI search in general. The fact that we all know that AI platforms, every single one of them still hallucinates to some degree, and measures have been put in place. I don't think it goes anything close to far enough, especially for YMYL topics. And healthcare is probably the most important one. There have already been situations where people are putting really important healthcare type topics into AI overviews and getting results that just either aren't true or that are sort of almost true. It's almost quite right, but it's just not, and it can be dangerous. And so I think that is something where we need to see more guardrails in place for those types of topics. I think broadly that's what we're going to see, because Google is widening what it refers to as YMYL. We've seen that last year. There was an update where sort of a wider section of topics are coming into that category. They take this kind of thing seriously, but I think are just trying to rush out AI overviews so quickly. It comes to take out some of the ground that they lost when ChatGPT and OpenAI started sort of getting ahead in the AI space. They needed to quickly rush out their products, and I think that has meant that we've had situations like that where things are rushed out now. But yeah, it needs to come back, and it needs to have more guardrails in place, because it will affect people's lives. People will put something in there and something will go wrong. We've always seen the kind of like jokey ones where it say something obviously, silly, and someone will post it to LinkedIn or onto Instagram or whatever, and we will have a laugh about it. But when it's actually something serious, then we need to take this kind of stuff much more seriously.
Absolutely. Well, Jonjo, thank you so much for your presentation today. I really do appreciate the time and the information that you've got in your deck. And these videos will be available for everybody in post. Thanks so much, Matt. We'll keep on going.